Anonymous STD testing is mostly a myth. People search for it, and I get it. They're often scared. But the truth is, when you add in doctors and pharmacies and laboratories, that anonymous bubble typically bursts. Today, I'm going to tell you how you can get anonymous STD testing, when that anonymous STD testing becomes not anonymous without your understanding or knowledge of it, and if you should care about this at all. To illustrate this point, I am putting a screen recording from Mistr up on the screen, and it says, "Get anonymous HIV testing." You click the button, the first thing it asks you for is your first name, and the second thing it asks you for is your last name. And that is the perfect illustration of how difficult it is to truly do anonymous STD testing, because you see, Mistr uses real doctors, real labs, real pharmacies, and your real insurance. And all of those things require your real information. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about is laboratories, and that's going to lead us to physicians. So laboratories in the United States, legitimate ones anyway, are certified by something known as CLIA. And the federal government has a role, but states have a role as well, with slightly different CLIA regulations. The important thing to understand is that many states do not allow direct-to-consumer STD testing, meaning a clinician has to order the test for the patient. And that brings us to the first thing, which is that those doctors want to have a real doctor-patient relationship, particularly during telehealth consultations. And I know this because I own a telehealth company. Doctors' licenses are on the line. They need to know who you are, not that you're a random person out there where they don't know what other medications you're on, what allergies you might have, where you live. They need a real doctor-patient relationship with you. Healthcare in America is many things, but anonymous is generally not one of them. Let's talk about insurance, because doctors and laboratories and everybody else likes to get paid. So if you have insurance, you're going to have a hard time not using that. Now, whenever you go get an STI test ordered from a nurse or a physician or something like that, there's going to be a billing code associated with that. Often something like high-risk sexual lifestyle. They need to tell your insurance company why you're getting all of these lab tests done. And then each individual test as well. All of that is going to be transmitted to your insurance company, and that's not going to be done anonymously. Confidentially, yes, but not anonymously. Now let's go ahead and transition to something that almost no one thinks about, and that's treatment. Everybody thinks about getting STI tested, even if you could get STI tested anonymously, and there are a couple of ways to do that, which we're going to talk about in a second. If you test positive for something, you're going to need treatment, and that is absolutely going to be run through your insurance. Let's think about this. Let's say you test positive for chlamydia. That's pretty easy to cure. You're going to need a week's worth of doxycycline. In most cases, that's obviously up to your doctor. But let's say that doctor sends that prescription to a local Walgreens. Well, first of all, that doctor is absolutely not going to do that without your information. Again, remember that real doctor-patient relationship. And then the instant that prescription hits the pharmacy, that pharmacy is going to run it through your insurance benefits program, where it's going to become a part of your electronic health record. And there is absolutely nothing you can do about that, practically speaking. Now, all of this is protected by HIPAA in the United States. So is it confidential? Yes. Is it anonymous? No. People think anonymous means they can show up wearing a mask, not give anybody their name, and get tested and treatment and everything like that. And that, I have to tell you, is virtually impossible. Next, let's talk about mandatory reporting requirements. So a lot of people don't know this, but if you test positive for an STI, that information is going to be transmitted to the local county health department, the state health department, and ultimately to the Centers for Disease Control. And this is the law in all 50 states. And I do mean law. Both the doctor and the lab are both legally required to submit this information. Now, it varies by state as far as what infections and what information has to be transmitted. But let's take a look at this mandatory reporting form from Iowa. You'll notice that it wants your name and your race and your address, what you tested positive for, and what the treatment was. And I can guarantee you that if the doctor writes none of your business in every one of those lines, sticks it in the fax machine, and sends it over to your local county health department, they're going to get a knock at the door that they're not willing to lose their license over. So can you avoid this? Well, you can try. You could go to a legitimate telehealth company and put in a fake name and a fake address and all of this sort of stuff and try to order testing. But generally speaking, they're going to want you to upload your ID, or maybe they have an AI system verifying this, because they're trying to protect their doctors from the very things that I'm talking about. Now, some local county health departments in some states do have truly anonymous testing, particularly for HIV, where you show up and you're given a code. You get your blood drawn, things like that. You come back a few days later with your code, and they tell you if you have an STI. And I think that's a wonderful program, but I want you to understand something about that. If you do have an STI, then you're going to have to deal with all the things that we're already talking about, like doctors and treatment, pharmacies, mandatory reporting, and that anonymous bubble goes pop, 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 pop. So again, confidential, yes. HIPAA protected, yes. Anonymous, no. You do have another option if you just don't want anyone to ever know that you got STI tested. And that is to go to Walmart or CVS or Walgreens with a big wad of cash and buy some instantaneous STI tests. Like this one is called the OraQuick. And in about 20 minutes in the privacy of your own home, you can find out if you have HIV. The limiting factor here is that they don't have enough of these tests on the market for different infections like gonorrhea, chlamydia, syphilis, mycoplasma, etc., for you to get anything near a complete STD panel. But if you're pretty concerned about specific infections, like a lot of people dealing with high anxiety are often worried about HIV, they hyper focus on HIV, then this is a great solution. Just keep in mind that if you test positive, you're going to need treatment, obviously, and you're going to have to kind of put yourself in the healthcare system, so to speak, and stop worrying about being anonymous, but begin worrying about confidential quality healthcare. Well, if you found this video because you're scared, I want to take a moment to talk to you. There is a difference between confidential and anonymous, and healthcare in the United States is confidential. I have had the pleasure of working with doctors and lab technicians and public health officials from across the country over the past several years at shamelesscare.com, and I can say unequivocally, every single one of them has been a true professional. When someone from a local county health department calls me about a positive STI, I can tell you that that person cares as much about your confidentiality as they do public health in general. These are true professionals. And in the case of physicians, people who have literally taken an oath to do no harm. And that includes outing you or shaming you, etc. So my personal opinion is, it's not up for me to tell you if you should care about this or not. I just got to tell you that it's practically impossible to remain completely anonymous when it comes to your sexual health, because you're going to need the services of lab technicians, laboratories, physicians, insurance, etc. It's just the way it is. I'm Robert from Shameless Care, and we'll talk soon.